The bullet grazed past Falisade's ear, so close she felt the heat sear her skin. She didn't scream. She couldn't. The shock had stolen her voice, frozen her lungs, turned her blood to ice water. Li Jun's hand clamped around her wrist like an iron shackle, yanking her sideways with such force her shoulder screamed in protest. They hit the marble floor together as another volley of gunfire shredded the air where her head had been milliseconds before. Stay down. Li Jun's voice cut through the chaos, sharp as a blade. Falisade's heart hammered against her ribs, so hard she thought it might break through. Around them, the opulent rooftop party had descended into pandemonium. Seoul's elite were scrambling, screaming, diving behind overturned tables. Champagne flutes shattered across Italian marble. A woman in a designer gown stumbled past them, mascara streaming down her face. But how did we get here? How did a simple slap turn into this nightmare? The slap. It had been deafening in that dressing room. Falisade could still feel the sting in her palm, still see the shock that had rippled across Li Jun's impossibly handsome face. His eyes had widened like a man who'd just been struck by lightning, like someone who'd forgotten what pain felt like. The other Korean women in the dressing room had frozen mid-movement, some with lipstick wands suspended in air, others with their phones already rising to capture what would become the viral moment of the century. 6 hours earlier, everything had been normal. Well, as normal as Seoul Fashion Week could be for a Nigerian designer trying to make her mark in a foreign country. Falisade had been adjusting the Ankara silk fusion dress she'd spent 3 months perfecting. The fabric was a masterpiece. Bold geometric patterns in purple and gold, traditional Nigerian Ankara woven with Korean silk in a way that honored both cultures without diminishing either. Her long braids, threaded with gold wire, cascaded down her back. She'd felt powerful. Ready. This was her moment. The other models had been chattering in rapid Korean, their excitement infectious, even though Falisade only caught every third word. She'd been in Seoul for 6 months now, long enough to navigate the subway and order tteokbokki, but not long enough to follow conversations at full speed. Then the ceiling vent had crashed open. The man who'd dropped through it looked like he'd walked straight out of a runway show and into a war zone. His Armani suit was immaculate, except for the dust coating his shoulders and what looked suspiciously like dark spatters on his collar. His long hair, the kind that made women write poetry, hung disheveled around a face that could have been carved from ice and sin. Tattoos snaked up his neck, disappearing beneath his collar. For a heartbeat, everyone had stared. Then Falisade's instincts had kicked in. Strange man. Women's dressing room. Dust and blood. Nothing about this was right. Her hand had connected with his face before conscious thought could stop her. The crack had echoed like a gunshot. Li Jun had stood there, hand slowly rising to his reddening cheek, and for the first time in what Falisade would later learn was 8 years, someone had caught the most dangerous man in Seoul completely off guard. You perverted piece of... Falisade had started, her Nigerian accent thick with rage. What kind of sick worker are you? You think you can just drop into women's dressing rooms like some boss? Boss! A tinny voice had crackled from somewhere on Li Jun's person. We heard impact. What's your status? The room had fallen into a silence, so complete Falisade could hear her own heartbeat. Then the door had exploded inward. 3 men, dressed in black tactical gear, had stormed in with weapons drawn. But they weren't looking at Li Jun. Their guns had swung toward the models, toward Falisade specifically, and in that crystalline moment she'd understood with perfect clarity that she was about to die. Li Jun had moved like poetry written in violence. His elbow had caught the first attacker in the throat with a sickening crunch. The man had dropped, gasping, clawing at his crushed windpipe. The second attacker had tried to bring his weapon to bear, but Li Jun had caught his wrist, twisted it backward with casual brutality, and used the man's own gun hand to shoot the third attacker in the kneecap. The sound had been deafening. The third man had crumpled, screaming. The first attacker, still struggling to breathe, had lurched forward and grabbed Falisade from behind. His arm had locked around her throat, cutting off her air. She'd clawed at him uselessly, panic flooding her system. Li Jun's hand had shot out, fingers wrapping around Falisade's arm. He'd yanked her against his chest with such force the attacker's grip had broken instantly. She'd felt Lee Jun's heart beating against her back, steady as a metronome, while he'd snapped the attacker's wrist with his free hand. The man had crumpled like a puppet with cut strings. 8 seconds. 3 armed men, unconscious or incapacitated. 8 seconds. Palisade had been pressed against Lee Jun's chest, his arm still wrapped protectively around her waist. She tilted her head back and their eyes had met. His were dark, fathomless, burning with something she couldn't name. For a moment suspended outside time, neither of them had moved. Then Lee Jun had released her, stepped back, and smoothed his hair with one hand as if he'd just finished a particularly boring meeting rather than a fight for survival. "Sorry, ladies," he'd said, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. Then he'd walked out, stepping over unconscious bodies like they were throw pillows. The room had erupted. Oh my God, who was that? One of the Korean models had grabbed her phone, fingers flying across the screen. "He looks like someone carved from ice." "Shut up," Palisade had snapped, her hands shaking so badly she'd had to clasp them together. "Men with guns just attacked us. Men with guns. And all you can think about is your Prince Charming?" Wait. Another model had thrust her phone forward, screen glowing. "That's not just any guy. That's Lee Jun, the Lee Jun." Palisade had stared at the phone. The man on the screen was the same one she'd just slapped, but cleaned up, polished, devastating in a photo shoot for Door. His long hair had been styled to perfection, those neck tattoos on full display, his expression brooding and dangerous in a way that probably made marketing executives salivate. "He's the face of everything," the model had continued, scrolling frantically. "Dior, Chanel, Gucci. Every luxury brand in the world is fighting to have him. He's untouchable. He's the guy I just slapped," Palisade had whispered. The models had turned to her in unison, expressions ranging from awe to horror to barely suppressed glee. "You slapped Lee Jun," one had said slowly, as if testing the words. "You slapped Lee Jun." Someone had started recording. Within minutes, the video had been everywhere. Now, 6 hours later, Palisade was sprawled on a rooftop floor while that same impossibly beautiful, impossibly dangerous man shielded her body with his own as bullets carved through the night air. Lee Jun's hand was still locked around her wrist. Through the thin fabric of his suit jacket, she could feel the coiled muscle, the controlled power. He pulled her up in one smooth motion, his other hand drawing a gun from an ankle holster she hadn't known existed. "Can you run in those heels?" he asked, his tone conversational despite the chaos. Palisade looked down at her 6-inch stilettos. The Ankara silk fusion gown she'd worn to this cursed party suddenly felt like a death sentence. "I can run in anything," she lied. Lee Jun's lips quirked, just barely. "Good. Because we're about to find out." He moved, and she moved with him, their bodies synchronized in a way that should have been impossible for two people who'd met hours ago. They sprinted toward the rooftop edge while gunfire chased them, sparks flying where bullets struck metal railings. A helicopter searchlight suddenly flooded the rooftop, turning night into artificial day. Palisade threw up her hand against the blinding glare. "Jump!" Lee Jun shouted. "What?" Palisade skidded to a stop at the edge. Below them was a 15-foot gap to the next building. 15 feet of empty soul air with the street a lethal distance below. "Trust me." Lee Jun's arm wrapped around her waist. "I don't even know you." He jumped, pulling her with him. For a heartbeat, they were airborne. Palisade's scream caught in her throat. The wind whipped her braids backward. The city lights blurred into streaks of gold and white. Lee Jun's arm was iron around her waist, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. They hit the adjacent rooftop hard, rolling across concrete. Palisade's dress tore, skin scraping raw, but they were alive. They were. "Boss." A voice crackled in Lee Jun's ear, loud enough that Palisade could hear it. "Boss, it's a full assault. 30 operatives, maybe more. Someone leaked your location." Lee Jun dragged Palisade to her feet, already moving toward the fire escape. "How many are ours?" "Just me and Jean at the perimeter. Everyone else is 3 minutes out." 3 minutes is a lifetime. Lee Jun's jaw clenched. "Get to extraction point Omega. We'll meet you there." They clattered down the fire escape, Palisade's heels ringing against metal. Her mind was reeling, trying to process everything, failing spectacularly. They hit the alley running. Li Jun's hand found hers again, pulling her through the darkness between Seoul's glittering buildings. Behind them, shouts in multiple languages, Korean, Mandarin, something else Palisade couldn't identify, echoed off concrete walls. Here, Li Jun skidded to a stop beside a motorcycle parked in the shadows. Not just any motorcycle, a Ducati Panigale, sleek and black and probably worth more than Palisade's entire year's salary. You're joking, Palisade panted. We're escaping on a motorcycle? In evening wear? Li Jun was already swinging his leg over, hands moving with practiced efficiency across the controls. Would you prefer to discuss transportation options with the people shooting at us? Fair point. The engine roared to life with a sound like controlled thunder. Li Jun looked back at her, and, even in the dim alley light, his eyes were intense enough to steal breath. Get on. Hold tight. Don't let go no matter what happens. Palisade hiked up her ruined gown and climbed on behind him. Her arms wrapped around his waist, and she felt the solid warmth of him, the controlled strength. This close, she could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle that somehow survived gunfights and rooftop escapes. Ready? He asked. Not even. He gunned it. The motorcycle shot forward like a bullet. Palisade's scream was lost in the engine's roar and the rush of wind. They burst out of the alley into Seoul's nighttime traffic, weaving between cars with a recklessness that should have been illegal. Probably was illegal. Behind them, headlights flared. 2 black SUVs, maybe 3, were giving chase. Li Jun took a corner so sharp Palisade felt the bike tilting, her knee nearly scraping asphalt. She pressed herself against his back, arms locked around him like he was the only solid thing in a tilting world. Who are these people? She shouted over the wind. Crimson Lotus. Li Jun shouted back. Chinese-Korean triad. Very angry. Very armed. Why are they shooting at us? Long story. They rocketed through Dongdaemun, the massive shopping district a blur of neon and steel. Pedestrians scattered. Horns blared. An SUV pulled alongside them, window rolling down, gun barrel emerging. Li Jun didn't hesitate. He twisted the throttle, the Ducati surging forward with a scream of pure speed. They shot through a gap between 2 buses that couldn't have been more than 6 inches wider than the bike itself. The SUV tried to follow and clipped a bus's bumper, spinning out in a shower of sparks. One down. Li Jun's voice carried a note of dark satisfaction. They plunged into the labyrinthine maze of Dongdaemun Market, the motorcycle weaving through narrow passages between vendor stalls. Fabric samples fluttered in their wake. A tower of cardboard boxes exploded as they grazed it. Palisade caught a glimpse of a vendor's shocked face, mouth hanging open. The remaining SUVs were too wide to follow. Their engines growled in frustration from the market's entrance. Li Jun didn't slow down until they'd emerged on the other side and put 3 more blocks between them and pursuit. Finally, he guided the Ducati into an abandoned warehouse district, killing the engine in the shadow of a building that looked like it hadn't been occupied since the 90s. Silence crashed over them like a wave. Palisade's hands were shaking as she climbed off the bike. Her legs felt like water. Her heart was trying to escape through her throat. She took 2 steps, turned, and faced Li Jun. What the hell was that? Li Jun swung off the motorcycle with fluid grace, running a hand through his windswept hair. Even after a gunfight and a high-speed chase, he looked like he could walk back onto a runway. It was infuriating. That, he said calmly, was the Crimson Lotus triad attempting to kill us both. I got that part. Palisade's voice climbed. What I don't understand is why. I'm a fashion designer. I make dresses. People don't shoot at people who make dresses. They do when those people are connected to Chief Ademola Adeyemi. The world stopped. Palisade stared at Li Jun, her father's name hanging in the air between them like smoke. How do you know my father's name? Li Jun's expression shifted, something complicated moving behind his eyes. Because your father and I. Headlights flooded the warehouse. Palisade's heart, which had just started to slow, kicked back into overdrive. Lee Jun's hand went to his gun, body tensing for another fight. But the vehicles rolling toward them weren't black SUVs. They were armored sedans, and as they stopped in a defensive perimeter around the warehouse, men and women in tactical gear emerged. They moved with military precision, weapons drawn but pointed down. "Boss." A man jogged forward, lean and sharp-featured, maybe 30. "We've secured the perimeter. No Crimson Lotus in a 3-block radius." Lee Jun relaxed fractionally. "Casualties?" Jean took a graze on his shoulder. "Nothing serious. Everyone else clean." The man's gaze slid to Palisade, curiosity evident. "This is her?" "Minho, meet Palisade Adeyemi." Lee Jun's voice was carefully neutral. "Miss Adeyemi, this is Kong Minho, my second in command." Palisade looked between them, her mind struggling to piece together a reality that made sense. "Second in command of what, exactly? Your modeling agency?" Minho laughed, the sound sharp and bright. "Oh, I like her. She's funny. She's also confused and probably traumatized," Lee Jun said. "Get us to the Kongwon safe house. Full security protocol. And Minho, find out how the Crimson Lotus knew I'd be at that party." Someone talked. Minho's expression hardened. "On it, boss." Within minutes, Palisade found herself in the back of an armored sedan, Lee Jun beside her. The interior was all black leather and tinted windows. A privacy screen separated them from the driver. As they pulled onto the highway heading out of Seoul, reality finally crashed over Palisade like a cold wave. Her hands started shaking again. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving exhaustion and shock in its wake. "Hey." Lee Jun's voice was softer than she'd heard it. "You're okay. Breathe." "Breathe?" Palisade's laugh came out broken. "Men just tried to kill me. On a rooftop. After I went to a party I didn't even want to attend because some stranger called me and said my father's legacy depended on it, which makes no sense because my father was a businessman who died in a car accident 3 years ago, except apparently you know something about that, and I can't." She was hyperventilating. The sedan's interior suddenly felt too small, the air too thin. Lee Jun reached across the space between them. His hand, the same hand that had pulled triggers and snapped wrists with casual brutality, settled on her shoulder with surprising gentleness. "Look at me," he said. "Palisade. Look at me." She did. His eyes were dark and steady, anchoring her. "In through your nose," he instructed. "Hold for 4 seconds. Out through your mouth. With me. In." They breathed together. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. Once. Twice. 5 times. 10. Slowly, Palisade's heart rate settled. The world stopped tilting. "Better?" Lee Jun asked. She nodded, not trusting her voice. "Good." He didn't move his hand from her shoulder. "Now I'm going to tell you some things. They're going to be hard to hear. But I need you to stay calm because we have about an hour's drive ahead of us, and I need you functional when we arrive." "Can you do that?" "Can I?" Palisade almost laughed again. "I just survived an assassination attempt on a motorcycle in 6-inch heels. I think I can handle some information." The corner of Lee Jun's mouth lifted. "That's the spirit." He settled back against the leather seat, finally removing his hand from her shoulder. Palisade found herself missing the warmth. "Your father," Lee Jun began, his gaze fixed on some point beyond the tinted windows, "was not just a businessman. Chief Ademola Adeyemi was one of the most brilliant smugglers I've ever known." The words landed like physical blows. No, my father he owned textile factories. Import-export. Legitimate business. He did own textile factories. Very successful ones. They were also perfect cover for moving conflict diamonds and rare fabrics through Nigerian ports. Lee Jun's voice was matter-of-fact, neither condemning nor defending. He worked with an organization called the White Dragon Syndicate. We handle high-value acquisitions and strategic distribution across 3 continents. We? Palisade's voice came out strangled. "You're part of this crime organization?" "I run it." The sedan hummed along the highway. Seoul's lights were fading behind them, replaced by darkness and the occasional glow of small towns. "You're insane," Palisade said finally. "This whole night is insane." You're telling me my father. My father who taught me to read, who took me to church every Sunday, who cried at my university graduation, was a criminal? Your father was a lot of things. Lee Jun turned to look at her directly. Criminal, yes. But also a man trying to build a better life for his daughter. Everything he did, every risk he took, was for you. Don't. Palisade's voice cracked. Don't you dare try to make this noble. If what you're saying is true, he lied to me. My entire life was a lie. Your father loved you. That was never a lie. How would you even know? You said you knew him, but Chief Ademla saved my life when I was 19 years old. Lee Jun's gaze went distant, remembering. I was nobody. A street kid in Seoul with a talent for fighting and nothing to lose. Your father was in Korea for a textile deal, and he saw me take down 5 men who tried to rob him. He asked me one question. Do you want to survive or do you want to live? I chose to live. He took me in, trained me, taught me everything about the business. When he went back to Lagos, I stayed in Seoul and built the White Dragon Syndicate from the ground up. Palisade processed this, her mind reeling. So you were like, what? His protege? More like the son he never had. Lee Jun's expression was unreadable. He talked about you constantly. My brilliant Palisade. She's going to change the world with her designs. He was so proud of you. Tears burned behind Palisade's eyes. She blinked them back furiously. If he cared so much, why did he die in a car accident and leave me alone? Because it wasn't an accident. The sedan made a turn, tires humming on smooth asphalt. Through the windows, Palisade could see they were entering more mountainous terrain. Lee Jun continued, his voice hard. 3 years ago, your father wanted out. He'd made enough money, built enough legitimate businesses. He wanted to retire, disappear, spend his remaining years watching you build your fashion empire. But when you're in as deep as Chief Ademla was, you don't just walk away. The Crimson Lotus Triad, our biggest rivals, couldn't allow it. He knew too much, had too much leverage. Palisade's throat felt tight. So they killed him. Car bomb. Lagos traffic, 3rd mainland bridge. They made it look like an accident, but I knew. Lee Jun's hands clenched into fists. I was supposed to be there that day. Your father and I had a meeting scheduled. He called me that morning, told me to stay in Seoul. That something felt wrong. 2 hours later, he was dead. The sedan climbed higher into the mountains. The temperature was dropping. Palisade could feel it even through the vehicle's climate control. Why didn't they come after you? She asked quietly. They tried. For 2 years, the Crimson Lotus and the White Dragon Syndicate have been locked in a shadow war. Assassinations, sabotage, territorial disputes. It's been, he paused, searching for the word. Expensive. But what does any of this have to do with me? I'm not part of your world. I make dresses. I went to design school in London. I've never even gotten a parking ticket. Lee Jun turned to face her fully. Before your father died, he created insurance. A ledger containing every transaction, every name, every dirty secret of both organizations. Politicians we've paid off. Routes we use. Warehouse locations. Bank accounts. Everything. If that ledger goes public, it destroys both the White Dragon and the Crimson Lotus completely. Understanding hit Palisade like ice water. And they think I have it. Your father's last communication to me was cryptic. He said, if something happens, the dragon's true treasure is with my daughter. She holds everything. We thought he meant the ledger. The Crimson Lotus thought the same thing. But I don't have any ledger. Palisade's voice rose. I don't have anything except student loans and fabric samples and a small apartment in Itaewon that I share with my friend Amaka. I believe you. Lee Jun's gaze was steady. Which means we need to figure out what your father actually meant. Because until we do, the Crimson Lotus will keep coming for you. And now that you've been seen with me publicly at that party, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The sedan began to slow. Through the windscreen, Palisade could see they were approaching a traditional Korean house, a hanok, nestled into the mountainside. It was beautiful in an austere way, all clean lines and natural materials, completely isolated from civilization. This is the Kamwan safe house, Lee Jun said. Only my most trusted people know about it. You'll be secure here while we figure this out. They climbed out of the sedan into mountain air, so cold and clean it stung Palisade's lungs. Her ruined evening gown was wholly inadequate for the temperature. She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering. Without a word, Li Jun shrugged out of his suit jacket and draped it over her shoulders. It was still warm from his body heat and smelled like his cologne and gunpowder and something uniquely him. Thank you, Palisade said quietly. Minho was already at the door, punching in a security code. Lights activated inside, warm and welcoming. The team moved with efficient purpose, securing the perimeter, checking sight lines, establishing a defensive position. Inside, the hammock was a study in minimalist elegance. Heated floors, low furniture, traditional screens mixed with modern security monitors. It was a safe house that didn't look like one. There are bedrooms upstairs, Minho said, addressing Palisade. We'll get you some clothes that actually fit. Food in 20 minutes. Boss, the secure line is ready in your office whenever you need it. Li Jun nodded. Get some rest, Minho. You've earned it. As the team dispersed, Palisade found herself alone with Li Jun in the main room. A floor-to-ceiling window looked out onto dark mountains and stars, so bright they seemed close enough to touch. I should call Amaka, Palisade said suddenly. My roommate. She's probably losing her mind. The last she heard, I was going to a party, and then she patted her dress, realized she'd lost her clutch purse somewhere between the rooftop and the motorcycle. I don't have my phone. It's better if you don't contact anyone right now, Li Jun said gently. The Crimson Lotus will be monitoring your known associates. Any communication could put your friend in danger. So I'm just supposed to disappear? She'll call the police. She'll think I've been kidnapped or worse. Technically, you have been kidnapped. Palisade stared at him. That's not funny. It wasn't meant to be. But there was something in his eyes, a glimmer of dark humor. I'll have Minho send an anonymous message to your friend. Something to let her know you're safe without revealing your location. Will that help? It would have to. Palisade nodded. A woman appeared from the kitchen area, middle-aged and efficient-looking, carrying a tray with tea and small dishes of banchan, traditional Korean side dishes. This is Mrs. Shin, Li Jun said. She manages the property. Doesn't speak English, but she's the best cook in 3 provinces. Mrs. Shin bowed, set down the tray, and disappeared as quietly as she'd come. Palisade sank onto one of the low cushions surrounding a traditional Korean table. Her feet were screaming from the heels, which she finally kicked off. Her body was one large bruise from the rooftop roll, the motorcycle ride, the general chaos of surviving the night. Li Jun settled across from her with unconscious grace, pouring tea into delicate cups. I still can't believe this is happening, Palisade said, accepting the tea. The warmth seeped into her hands. This morning I was worried about whether my stitch work was too visible on the hem of a gown. That was my biggest problem. Visible stitching. What was the gown for? The question surprised her. What? The gown. The one you were worried about. What was it for? Palisade blinked. Why do you care? Li Jun sipped his tea. I'm curious. You're a designer. That's not a cover, not a lie. It's who you are. So tell me about your work. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was shock. Maybe it was this simple human need to grasp onto something normal in a night that had been anything but. Whatever the reason, Palisade found herself talking. It was for the Paradigm Fashion House Spring Collection. They gave me a slot, just one, but it's huge for someone like me. The gown was a fusion piece. Ankara fabric from Nigeria woven with Korean silk. I wanted to show that different cultures don't have to clash. They can enhance each other, create something beautiful and new. She paused. I sound pretentious. You sound passionate. Li Jun's gaze was intent. Your father used to talk about your passion for design. He said you could see possibilities in fabric that other people missed. He really talked about me that much? Constantly. It was annoying, actually. A small smile played at Li Jun's lips. Every phone call. Palisade got accepted to this program. Palisade's design won this award. You should see what my daughter created. I knew your entire academic and professional history before I ever met you. Palisade felt tears threatening again. I wish he'd told me about you. About any of this. At least then I could have, I don't know, been prepared? There's no preparing for this world. You just survive it. Lee Jun's expression grew serious. Which brings me to an important question. Tomorrow morning, Minho is going to start investigating what your father might have meant by his message. We need to access his old files, his properties, anything he might have left behind. That means you need to decide, are you in this, or do you want out? Out? Palisade laughed bitterly. You just told me the Crimson Lotus is trying to kill me. How do I get out? I can arrange protection. New identity, new location. You'd have to leave Seoul, leave your career here, but you'd be safe. We'd hunt for the ledger without you, and once we found it, once the threat was neutralized, you could go back to your life. Could I? Palisade met his eyes. After everything I now know, after learning my father was a criminal and I'm apparently the key to some international crime war, do I just go back to worrying about visible stitching? Some people would choose that. There's no shame in wanting a normal life. And what's the alternative? Lee Jun leaned forward slightly. You help us find the ledger. You're your father's daughter. You might see connections, understand clues that we'd miss. You'd be in danger, but you'd also have the full resources of the White Dragon Syndicate protecting you. And when this is over, you'd have answers. Real answers about who your father was and why he made the choices he made. Palisade thought about her father. About Sunday church services and university graduations, and the way he'd cried when she'd shown him her first real design, a simple dress she'd made at 15. She thought about all the questions that had haunted her since his death. Why had he been on that bridge? Why had he seemed distracted in their last phone call? Why had he told her he loved her 3 times before hanging up, when once was his usual? I want answers, she said finally. I want to understand. Then you're in? I'm in. Something shifted in Lee Jun's expression. Relief, maybe. Or respect. Good. Because I think your father chose you for a reason. He was brilliant. He wouldn't have left his legacy to chance. A yawn caught Palisade by surprise. So wide her jaw cracked. The adrenaline crash was complete now, leaving her hollowed out and exhausted. Lee Jun stood with fluid grace. Mrs. Shin prepared a room for you. 2nd floor, first door on the right. There should be clothes that fit. We'll start fresh in the morning. Palisade rose, her body protesting every movement. At the base of the stairs, she paused and turned back. Lee Jun? He looked up from where he'd begun reviewing something on a tablet. Yes. Thank you. For saving my life tonight. Multiple times. His expression was unreadable. Thank me when this is over and you're still alive. It wasn't comforting, but it was honest. Palisade climbed the stairs to find the room exactly as promised. Someone, probably the efficient Mrs. Shin, had laid out comfortable clothes, soft pants, a warm sweater, sleeping garments. Palisade showered, washing away the grime and blood and fear of the night. When she finally collapsed into the bed, her mind was still racing, but her body overruled it. She was asleep within minutes. Downstairs, Lee Jun stood at the window, staring out at the dark mountains. Minho appeared beside him, 2 glasses and a bottle of expensive whiskey in hand. She's tougher than she looks, Minho observed, pouring. Chief Ademola's daughter. I'd expect nothing less. Lee Jun accepted the glass. What's the status? Jin's wound is cleaned and dressed. Perimeter is secure. I've got teams working on how the Crimson Lotus knew about tonight's party. Minho's expression darkened. Boss, it had to be someone close. That event was invitation only, location kept quiet until 6 hours before. I know. Lee Jun sipped the whiskey, feeling the burn. Make a list of everyone who knew. Everyone. We'll go through them one by one. You think we have a mole? I think Chief Ademola didn't die by accident, and 3 years later his daughter nearly dies at a party I'm hosting. The timing isn't coincidental. Lee Jun's grip tightened on his glass. Someone's playing a long game. I want to know who. Minho nodded and pulled out his phone, fingers already flying across the screen. I'll have preliminary data by morning. What about the girl? Palisade. What? Her name is Palisade, not the girl. Lee Jun's tone was mild but carried an edge. And she's staying. She's going to help us find the ledger. Minho's eyebrows rose. You trust her? I trust that she wants answers as badly as we do. And I trust that Chief Ademla didn't leave his final message to chance. If he said she holds everything, then she does. We just need to figure out how. They stood in silence for a moment. Two men who'd survived things that should have killed them, contemplating the puzzle that was Chief Ademla Adeyemi's last gift to the world. Boss? Minho said quietly. The way you look at her. Don't. Li Jun's voice went flat. Don't go there. I'm just saying getting emotionally involved with. I said don't. Li Jun drained his whiskey and set the glass down with precise care. Get some rest, Minho. Tomorrow's going to be complicated. Minho recognized a dismissal when he heard one. He bowed slightly and left, but his concerned expression lingered in the room like smoke. Alone, Li Jun returned to the window. Somewhere in those dark mountains, enemies were plotting. Somewhere in Seoul, the Crimson Lotus was regrouping, planning their next move. And upstairs, Chief Ademla's daughter slept, unaware that she'd walked into a war that had been brewing for 3 years. Li Jun touched his cheek where she'd slapped him. Twice now. No one had dared touch him in violence in 8 years. His reputation alone kept most threats at bay. But Falisade had seen a threat and acted without hesitation, without fear, without knowing who he was or what he could do. Chief Ademla had been right about his daughter. She was extraordinary, and Li Jun was going to make sure she survived long enough to realize it. Morning came with pale sunlight filtering through traditional paper screens. Falisade woke disoriented, her body aching, her mind taking several seconds to remember where she was and why. The events of the previous night crashed back like a wave. The party, the gunfire, the motorcycle chase, the impossible revelations about her father. She dressed in the clothes Mrs. Shin had provided, simple but high quality, and made her way downstairs. Voices drifted from what appeared to be a formal dining area. Li Jun sat at the head of a low table, his long hair pulled back, dressed in casual clothes that somehow made him look more dangerous rather than less. Minho occupied a seat to his right, tablet in hand. Two other team members Falisade didn't recognize flanked the table. Good morning, Li Jun said, his gaze tracking her as she entered. Sleep well? I slept like someone who survived multiple assassination attempts. Falisade settled onto a cushion. So, terribly with nightmares. You? A ghost of a smile crossed Li Jun's face. About the same. Mrs. Shin appeared with a breakfast spread that could have fed 10 people. Rice, soup, grilled fish, vegetables, various banchan. Falisade's stomach reminded her she hadn't eaten since lunch the previous day. Eat, Li Jun instructed. We have work to do, and you'll need your strength. While they ate, Minho brought them up to speed. I've been digging into Chief Ademla's holdings. After his death, most of his assets were liquidated or transferred to you, Miss Adeyemi, through various trusts. Falisade looked up, startled. I inherited everything. The lawyer said it was mostly just the textile business, some property. On paper, yes. Minho tapped his tablet. But there are layers. Shell corporations, offshore accounts. Your father was very good at hiding assets. I found references to a safety deposit box in Lagos, registered under a company name that traces back to him. The holding period expires in 2 weeks. A safety deposit box? Falisade's mind raced. I never knew about any safety deposit box. Did you ever receive any correspondence from Lagos Trust and Security Bank? Falisade paused. Yes, actually. About a week ago. I got an email saying I needed to collect contents of a box within 30 days or it would be forfeit. I thought it was spam. I get so many scam emails trying to. She stopped, understanding dawning. Oh my god. Li Jun leaned forward. What did the email say exactly? Something about box 4702, 3-year holding period expired. Collect within 30 days. There was an attachment, a scanned letter. Falisade's hand went to her throat. I deleted it. I thought it was a scam trying to get me to click on malware. Do you still have access to the email? Maybe in my trash folder? But my laptop is back at my apartment in Seoul, and you said I can't contact anyone. Minho, Li Jun said simply. Minho was already on his phone. I'll have a team at her apartment in 20 minutes. We'll retrieve the laptop, sweep for surveillance devices while we're there. Wait, you're just going to break into my apartment? Palisade's voice rose. We prefer to think of it as an unauthorized wellness check. Minho's expression was perfectly innocent. Despite everything, Palisade almost laughed. This is insane. Welcome to the White Dragon Syndicate. Li Jun's tone was dry. Insanity is our baseline. It gets worse from here. Over the next 2 hours, Palisade watched the team work with an efficiency that would have impressed a military unit. Minho coordinated the apartment retrieval. Other team members cross-referenced Chief Ademola's known aliases against financial databases. Someone was tracking Crimson Lotus movements across Seoul, marking potential threat vectors on a digital map. Li Jun orchestrated it all from his position at the table, his mind clearly tracking multiple threads simultaneously. Palisade found herself fascinated despite her anxiety. This was a different side of the man who graced magazine covers. This was the criminal mastermind her father had trained, the leader who commanded absolute loyalty. Got it. Minho looked up from his tablet. Your laptop is being delivered by a secure courier. Should be here in 40 minutes. That was fast. Palisade blinked. We're efficient. You're terrifying. That too. The laptop arrived exactly 40 minutes later. Palisade opened it with hands that trembled slightly. Her email loaded, and there it was in her trash folder, the message from Lagos Trust and Security Bank. One of the tech specialists gestured. May I verify it's legitimate before you open the attachment? Palisade slid the laptop over. The specialist worked for several minutes, running scans, checking headers, tracing the email's origin. It's legitimate, he announced finally. Sent from Lagos Trust and Security Bank's actual servers, not spoofed. The attachment is a clean PDF. No malware. Palisade opened the attachment with Li Jun leaning over her shoulder, close enough that she could feel his warmth. The scanned letter was in her father's handwriting. She'd recognize it anywhere. His distinctive slanted script, the way he looped his T's. My dearest Palisade, she read aloud, her voice catching. If you are reading this, I am gone. What I am about to tell you will change everything you know about me, and I am sorry for that. The box contains the truth about my life, my work, and my love for you. Everything I did was to build a better world for you to inherit. Trust only the dragon's shadow. He will find you when the time is right. Inside the box, you will find 3 things: my confession, my protection, and my hope for your future. The key is what I taught you. Remember the stories. I love you more than all the stars in the Nigerian sky. Your devoted father. Silence fell over the room. The dragon's shadow, Minho said slowly. That's you, boss. It has to be. Li Jun's expression was unreadable. Chief Ademola used to call me that. He said I moved through the criminal world like a shadow. There but not there. Deadly but invisible. Palisade's eyes were swimming with tears, but she blinked them back furiously. He knew. He knew he was going to die, and he set this all up. The ledger must be in that safety deposit box, Minho said, along with whatever else he wanted you to have. Then we go to Lagos. Li Jun straightened. We retrieve the contents, find the ledger, and end this. Boss, Lagos is Crimson Lotus territory now. One of the team members objected. After Chief Ademola died, they moved in, took over his operations. Going there is suicide. Then we'll have to be very careful. Li Jun's smile was sharp enough to cut. Start making arrangements. I want a full tactical plan by this afternoon. The room exploded into activity. Palisade sat motionless, staring at her father's letter. He says the key is what he taught me. Remember the stories. What does that mean? Did your father tell you stories? Li Jun asked. He told me lots of stories. Yoruba folktales, Nigerian history, stories about his childhood. Palisade's mind raced through memories. He had this one story he told me all the time, about Anansi the spider and how wisdom scattered across the world. He said wisdom couldn't be kept in one place. It had to be shared, hidden in unexpected places for the clever to find. Li Jun's eyes sharpened. A scattering. Hidden in unexpected places. You think the ledger isn't just in the safety deposit box? I think your father was too smart to put all his insurance in one location. Lee Jun's mind was clearly working through possibilities. But the box is the starting point. We find what's there. We follow the trail he left. Palisade looked at the letter again, her father's words blurring. I'm going with you. To Lagos. Absolutely not, Lee Jun said immediately. It's my father's legacy. My inheritance. You're not leaving me behind. Lagos is dangerous. And Seoul wasn't. I survived last night. I'll survive Lagos. Palisade met his eyes with steel in her own. Besides, you said it yourself. I might see connections you miss. You need me. For a long moment, Lee Jun stared at her. Then, incredibly, he laughed. A real laugh, surprised and genuine. You really are Chief Ademla's daughter, he said. Stubborn, brilliant, and absolutely impossible to argue with. Is that a yes? That's a yes. But you follow my orders. No arguments, no hesitation. In Lagos, I'm not your ally or your friend or your father's protege. I'm your commanding officer. Understood? Understood. Palisade extended her hand. Partners? Lee Jun looked at her hand, then took it. His grip was warm and strong. Partners. Minho cleared his throat. If you two are done making dramatic declarations, we have a situation. The room's energy shifted instantly. Lee Jun's expression went cold and focused. Report. Message just came through Crimson Lotus channels. It's a direct communication to you, boss. Minho's face was grim. It's from Victor Chen. Victor Chen is dead, Lee Jun said flatly. I killed him 3 nights ago. Apparently not well enough. Minho turned his tablet around. The video showed a man in his 30s, handsome in a sharp-featured way, with a scar running from his left eyebrow to his jaw. He sat in what looked like an expensive office, Seoul's skyline visible through windows behind him. Hello, Lee Jun, Victor Chen said, his voice smooth and cultured. Surprised to see me? You should have made sure I was dead before crawling through those vents. But I suppose you were distracted by more pressing matters. Like a certain Nigerian designer who's caught your attention. Palisade felt ice form in her stomach. Victor leaned forward, his smile predatory. I know about the ledger. I know about Chief Ademla's little insurance policy. And I know his daughter is your weakness now. So here's my offer. Bring me the ledger and the girl, and I'll make your death quick. Refuse, and I'll make sure she suffers for every member of my organization you've killed. You have 72 hours to decide. The clock starts now. The video ended. No one spoke. Then Lee Jun's fist slammed into the table with enough force to crack the wood. He's been alive this whole time. The assassination, the ventilation shaft incident, it was all a setup. He wanted me to think I'd won. He wanted to see what you'd do next, Minho said quietly. Who you'd protect. Boss, he knows about Palisade. He's known since the dressing room. Palisade found her voice. So what do we do? Lee Jun turned to her, and for the first time since they'd met, she saw real fear in his eyes. Not for himself, for her. We go to Lagos, he said. We find that ledger. And then we end Victor Chen and the Crimson Lotus permanently. No matter what it costs. The team mobilized. Plans were drawn. Weapons were checked. Palisade sat in the middle of it all, her father's letter still glowing on her laptop screen, and wondered what exactly she'd inherited along with Chief Ademla's secrets. As the sun began to set over the Kongwon Mountains, Lee Jun stood beside her at the window. You can still walk away, he said quietly. I can protect you without dragging you into this war. Palisade thought about her father's words. Trust only the dragon's shadow. Everything I did was to build a better world for you to inherit. No, she said. I'm seeing this through. Whatever my father left me, whatever this ledger contains, it's mine. And I'm going to find it. Lee Jun nodded slowly. Then tomorrow we fly to Lagos. And Palisade? Yes. When this is over, remind me to tell you about the time your father and I smuggled 50,000 yards of silk through Chinese customs by hiding it in coffins. Despite everything, the danger, the fear, the impossible situation, Palisade smiled. That sounds like a terrible story. It's worse than you can imagine. Your father had a terrible sense of humor. I know. He told jokes at funerals. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching night fall over the mountains. Tomorrow would bring new dangers, new revelations, new battles. But for this moment, there was peace. And in the growing darkness, neither of them noticed the shadow watching from the tree line or the camera lens glinting in the fading light. If you're enjoying this story and want to see what happens when Palisade and Lee Jun reach Lagos and uncover the truth about the ledger, smash that like button. Drop a comment with your theories about what Chief Ademla hid in that safety deposit box, and subscribe so you don't miss part 2. Trust me, you won't believe where this story goes next. The real game is just beginning.